One of the funniest things in it when I opened it up was that you use the word enshittification, highly scientific and technical word here.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to Higher Ed Pulse, your no-fluff guide to artificial intelligence in higher ed. I'm Mallory Willsea, bringing nearly 20 years of edtech and marketing expertise straight to your earbuds. Higher ed leaders are expected to master AI overnight, but let's be real, no one has time to sift through every headline, hot take, or research report. That's why every Monday I'll break down what actually matters, fast, clear, and to the point. Want to sound like the smartest person in the room at your next team meeting? You're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Higher Ed Pulse. On today's episode, we're going red stapler. That's right. I've got the best in conference winner from the 2025 Digital Collegium Annual Conference with me. Adam Heidebrink-Bruno is the digital content specialist at Finger Lakes Community College. Adam manages web content, SEO, and digital strategy, and has been experimenting with AI search tools to understand how they're already reshaping student discovery. His session, Preparing for AI Search and the Generative College Discovery Process, was voted the top session by the DigiCol attendees, and he is here to break it down for everyone who wasn't in the room last month. Adam, welcome to the Pulse. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So listeners don't know, but we very serendipitously met at lunch the day of your session. I just plopped down next to you, started peppering you with all of these questions. I just feel so lucky that I had a chance to sit next to our best in conference winner that day. So congratulations first and foremost. And I need to know, what is it like to have your 15 minutes of DigiCol fame?
It was exciting. It was unexpected, and it's a great honor. It was actually my first time presenting at Digital Collegium.
Wow.
My second time there in person. So it was really exciting to not only present there for my first time, but to have been voted best in conference. I'm glad so many folks have taken away some good information from my session.
Well, you clearly were the golden nugget for a lot of people coming out of the conference, but I need to know, what was your golden nugget? Because I'm sure you went to a bunch of really great sessions too.
There were so many great sessions at Digital Collegium this year. Returning home with so many ideas, I think it's really, really hard to say what the one golden nugget for me was. Honestly, a lot of the value for a conference from me comes from those informal moments between sessions, over lunches and stuff. And I really felt like I built out my professional network a bit this year. So chatting with folks like you over lunch has been fantastic. And I'm coming home not only with new ideas, but with some new relations and connections to continue talking about these things moving forward.
That's amazing. I think that's one of my favorite reasons to go to events like this. So many people in my network are folks who I met 15 years ago at my first Digital Collegium. And that network expansion really matters, especially when we're digging into really big topics like the one today, because we're in this moment still of learning and experimentation, and we're all kind of figuring it out at the same time. And I think these are the moments when we have to lean on that network the most.
Yeah, absolutely.
So friends, I know you've been listening to the Pulse this year, and we have been talking a lot about how AI is reshaping discovery, from OpenAI's latest research on how people actually use ChatGPT, which I just covered with Heather in a podcast episode last week, all the way to the industry data that shows how quickly search behavior is shifting. And if you scroll back through the podcast feed, you're going to find a bunch of episodes with folks like Oho and Manafera covering their data. Now, Adam's Red Stapler session took the conversation out of theory and pushed it into reality. It is proof of how campuses are making this all work on the ground. It's happening right now. And instead of scrolling 10 blue links, prospective students are asking generative tools like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Google's AI overviews to compare colleges, explain financial aid, and even recommend programs. The numbers back it up. We know Bright Edge reports that impressions are up 49% since AI Overviews launched, but the click-through rates are down 30%. Carnegie and higher visibility surveys among those I just mentioned show graduating seniors are already leaning on AI search in their college research. So we're going to ground this conversation in data, but bring it to the ground as well, as Adam's session did. We're going to dig into those insights from DigiCall so you can find out if your institution is prepared to show up in the answers that students are already getting. So Adam, we need to start here. And I'll mention, folks, I'm putting the link to his slide deck in the show notes. So if you want to see that Red Stapler session slide deck, give that link a click. But one of the funniest things in it when I opened it up was that you use the word enshittification, highly scientific and technical word here. I don't know if we're going to find it in the dictionary, but we find it in your deck. I laughed so hard because it really does capture exactly what we are all feeling when we look at search results right now. It is more ads, more clutter, less stuff that we actually want. So I don't want to put words into your mouth. You're the expert. Like, what did you mean by the word enshittification? And why does it feel like it's so right?
Yes. No, that's a wonderful place to start because, as someone that works in content, I'm constantly putting stuff on the internet, and I want that to be a really wonderful experience for folks as they're going about searching for information in the college context for a next really big step in their life. Enshittification is not my term. It was coined by Cory Doctorow, I believe in 2022, and went almost immediately viral because it captured something that, as you just said, a lot of people are feeling, right? They're feeling that the current user experience of some of the major platforms they're on, whether that's social media or search, are kind of a shell of their former self. And one thing that Doctor talks about when he talks about enshittification is that large tech companies and platforms go through the kind of these three phases, where the first one is they're doing everything in their power to attract a massive user base, right? And so user experience is everything. They're trying to pull users from other platforms onto theirs, and they're pulling out all the stops to do that. Once they have that user base, they then use that user base to attract business customers, right? So they start monetizing and adding ads and adding other features that might actually detract a little bit from the user experience to bring in ad revenue, to bring in the business customers. Once both of those audiences are locked into a platform, once it reaches a certain amount of scale, the only way to grow is kind of this third phase of enshittification, where you look for more ways to extract value from both the users and the business customers. And for many folks that are browsing the web, and for many folks that have messages they need to share through web channels, they're feeling that third phase of enshittification in some really real ways. So it's a hilarious term, but it's actually a kind of a painful reality to be living through. Think about the small businesses that once were able to communicate really freely and openly to their audiences on social media. We're seeing shifts in the algorithm that makes it much harder for those small businesses to reach their audiences organically, because, of course, they're willing to pay for that message to be delivered, and the platform wants that to happen. We're also seeing links get de-emphasized, right? Posts with links are being shared and shown less frequently in social media, meaning we can't link out to our own content elsewhere, right? So we're locked into those platforms whenever we're there. And we're seeing the similar thing in search, right? And so I started my presentation with this little overview of enshittification because it's a reality that we're living in as we're producing content and as we're trying to share our messages as institutions and colleges with the wider world. And so it's interesting that search, or generative AI search, enters at this moment where the traditional search experience is so cluttered with noise, so cluttered with advertisements, so cluttered with content that's not actually relevant or answering the question that I want answered in that moment, right? And I get excited about generative AI search results because it gives us a new way to kind of explore the wealth of information that's available online. I don't know if that's going to be the long trajectory or arch of generative AI, but right now it's a way for some users online to escape the third phase of enshittification that are experiencing on some of these platforms and migrate to a platform that is very much in that first phase of trying to attract users at all costs. And because of that, many generative search engine results page are very clean, very question answer oriented, and I've personally loved that experience. So.
When I was talking to Heather Mueller from Capture Higher Ed on the podcast last week, I mentioned that, backing up OpenAI's data, like I am going to ChatGPT first for pretty much every question I have at this point. I use Perplexity a little bit as well, but like ChatGPT has really become my new Google. And the data from OpenAI shows us that 3/4 of ChatGPT usage is personal. Growth is strongest among the young user group of 18 to 24-year-olds. And it's like this generation is growing up with these AI tools just like right at their side. And I know you referenced a lot of data in your presentation too, from Bright Edge and Carnegie and others. But like data aside, Adam, like you are actually like living all of this on a campus. So as you read the reports, as you see this information, like how real does the shift feel to you in your role as a digital content strategist? And like, what are you seeing in your analytics at Finger Lakes?
That's a great question. That's also a little bit of a tricky question because the analytics aren't necessarily keeping up with some of the things that I'm seeing or I'm experiencing when I talk to students, right? So we can see in Google Analytics 4 if traffic came from ChatGPT, for instance, right, referral traffic data. And for us, that's less than 1% of our traffic. So that's not a huge population. It's one that we want to keep an eye on. It's one that I do monitor. But what really matters is what we're not actually able to see and what we're not able to track, right? There are billions of ChatGPT search sessions happening a day, I think. And we don't know what those searches look like, right? There's no data dashboard for marketers or institutions to look at to see what the conversations that users are having with ChatGPT. Those conversations are happening, and if they aren't resulting in a click to our website, we don't know exactly what happened there. We can, and I'll talk about a little bit later, how we can start testing some of that stuff manually, but we cannot track with any level of detail what that experience looked like for these millions and millions of users that are having these conversations. Yeah, so when I look at the reports and I see the Carnegie, data that says that nearly 75% of graduating seniors are either using ChatGPT or using AI as a conversational tool to help them think through their college choices or directly as a search tool. That number is very different than the 1% I see as referral traffic, but that's the number that I trust more. And honestly, in a certain sense, that number is 100%. Because if you cast a standard search query today, the very first thing you're going to see is generative content, right? If you're on Google, you're going to see the Google AI overview, and you've already been influenced by content that no human wrote, but that was pulled forward by machine learning and an algorithm. So when I speak to students, because in addition to doing marketing work, I often teach first-year writing courses. I actually get to speak to a bunch of college freshmen. That's a really exciting opportunity to learn a little bit about their digital habits as researchers, as students, as folks that just made a decision about college. So I often have that conversation with students. And I see students falling into pretty extreme camps. They're either all in on AI, they've been using it, right? For many of these students coming in this past year, generative AI became a really big deal when they were college sophomores. So next class is going to be the folks that went through their entire high school journey with AI by their side, right? They're getting close to being generative AI native users of the internet, where it's the formative experiences of their internet life has been defined largely by generative content. That's the future that I'm kind of looking for, and that's the one I'm trying to plan for as I do the research into generative AI.
Adam, dibs on having you and one of your students back on the podcast a year from now so we can like dig into all of that. I'm putting it on my calendar. We will not forget. So something you were just talking about made me think how user preference really matters, right? And when we're in marketing communications, we want to be in front of our target audience when they want us there, at the right place, at the right time, with the right message. And that is certainly one of the many promises of generative AI. But you have talked a bit in your presentation too about this idea of a zero-click lifestyle, right? And that's one of the big differences between traditional search and AI search, and gets at that user preference. Like, maybe I don't want to click into the website. Maybe I just want AI to tell me the answer. So it feels like this helps us as marketers kind of shift towards that preference of our target audience. But in practice, as you noted, like you have to give up some of the data and some of the knowledge in order to be in that space for the user when they want you there. In practice, I mean, loaded question, but like, what does this mean for a college marketing and communications team?
Yeah. In terms of embracing that zero-click lifestyle, yeah, it's right now it's a massive blind spot. So we don't know exactly how users are engaging with it, and we don't know exactly how our brand communications are being shared with users in that moment. So I think that information will become available as OpenAI and other companies look for ways to attract advertisers. Advertisers and marketers are going to demand that kind of granular detail.
I am not looking forward to the day when I open up my ChatGPT interface and I'm, smacked with an ad in my face, but I feel like the days are numbered.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And it's a shame because that's what drives a lot of my interest in it. But yeah, I was an early convert to kind of the zero-click lifestyle. I shared during my presentation a really successful zero-click moment I had this past spring, when I planned my entire backyard garden, which was 5 raised beds, with a single query and the response that I got in ChatGPT. It's fantastic. It's the best garden I ever had, and the user experience was great, right? And this, I think, is what's driving the rapid growth of zero-click search results as an internet experience that users are really enjoying. Is I have really, really complex questions that I want answered when I use the internet, right? And the internet is this amazing networked repository of like the world's knowledge. Traditionally, we get that knowledge one piece of content at a time, right? And if we're lucky, our search query with some good keywords gets us the most relevant stuff. But at the end of the day, we're looking at one or two sources, one at a time, and that's a really lengthy process. So for something like planting my own garden, I would have opened dozens and dozens of individual pieces of content to figure out what I needed to figure out for my specific contextual question of my backyard garden, right? That's a lot of work. That's a lot of stress. I don't want to be sitting in front of the screen figuring that out for, hours on end. I want to get out there and enjoy a beautiful spring day, right? And so I think this zero-click moment gives us an opportunity to imagine how else we can pull forward information from the internet, right? As a content producer, what that makes me do is it's a really good reminder that the website is not your content. Content work is actually further upstream than how it's outputs for a user, right? And so when I'm producing something that is going to be shared online, right? And we had this moment as an industry years ago when mobile devices became, the primary place where folks see web content. How does our desktop designs look on mobile was kind of a moment where we had to reflect. Oh no, our content.
A scary moment.
It was a scary moment, and we had to just, figure out how do we make our content look good in this other, output format? And right, we came up with responsive design frameworks. And now we have, and we did the same thing when social media came on the scene. How does this content look good and different on a website versus a mobile device versus on a social page, right? We want to extend that thinking to be, how does my web content look on a search results page, right? A traditional one. So we have good metadata, we have good titles, so it looks appropriate there. And now we're poised with the same question for generative AI. How are we making sure our content is structured in a way that it is being pulled forward into the output format of generative AI in a way that still shares the message that we want to share with our audience, right? It's a little bit tricky and new because we don't have control over the language itself, right? Anything that goes into ChatGPT becomes that ChatGPT persona and voice. So in so much as our communications and brand is built into our style and our tone, we risk losing some of that in there. But it's really, it's a moment where we have to study a new digital channel and find out the conventions that are best fit for that new channel. How do we get our message to show up in that zero-click moment that so many users are liking? So many users like.
And you gave us in your session a rubric and a framework for actually how to do that. So can you walk us through it?
Yeah, I have a process I go through every time I produce content online, and that process is really fairly manual, right? I don't have any automation built into this yet. We know that there's not a lot of data informing this other than what we can see for ourselves in our own chat sessions. So for me, what that means is that anytime I'm producing content, before, during, and after, I am having chat conversations with AI engines to see how similar content is being structured and talked about, right? And when I do that, I'm not doing it so much to co-create content with AI. I'm writing most of my content myself, but I'm doing it as kind of industry and market research. So what I tend to do is I try to put myself in the position of a student who has pressing questions about the content I am about to produce, whether that is building out international student content, or lately I've been thinking about our applied learning and internships programs is going to be built out more online. And I ask myself, what are the questions that our students are most interested in when they are thinking about internships, thinking about our programs that have applied learning, or what are international students talking about when they are trying to make the decision about where to go to school in the US for an international study abroad experience. I ask those questions, I simulate those questions in a generative AI chat session. And I do that first as a really broad, unbranded discovery moment, right? So what would a student say before having any brand recognition of where they might go, right? So they're asking these early questions, how much does it even cost? What, am I going to need, what's the visa process like for an international student? So they're asking questions that they really need answers to, right? And they don't even know where to start. They're not looking for institutions at that moment. And then I continue that conversation until it gets to these more branded moments. Like, okay, what is it about the FLCC international experience that could be exciting for someone that's looking to study in upstate New York, or in the area, right? And what I'm looking for when I'm casting these kind of student-focused searches is how the content is coming through, how existing content is already coming through. So I'm looking at the citations, I'm looking at the content itself. Is it accurately describing our program or opportunities for international students? And then I'm also looking at the other citations that are not my institution, right? And then this allows me to get actually some good market research done to see how some competing institutions have structured their content, especially if it does seem to be coming through in an AI chat session really well, right? There's opportunities for me to learn about content structure there as I'm looking at these citations. I look at the accuracy of how our own information comes through. So if we get to the point of what is the application process like, is it describing it in the same or similar way as it's being described on our website or not? Where is it pulling the information from? We might have admissions application information on, several websites across our domain. And there also might be references to our application process elsewhere on the web. So I'm seeing how much of it is coming from our flagship website and where else this content is being pulled from. So it's a manual process. I do it before, during, and after. I think it really ends up producing some great content. It gives me content strategy ideas, right? As I look at competitors, it gives me content structure ideas, like, okay, these headers that are showing up in ChatGPT are the headers of questions that students are asking. And it gives me a way to kind of audit our content and identify any gaps in existing content so I can build that content out online.
It strikes me too, if someone's listening and they're like, well, I'd love to do this, but I'm not quite sure like what questions to start with if I'm stepping into that prospective student or current student shoes. If just go ask ChatGPT that too. Like you can actually start that process in ChatGPT.
It does now. You can also ask your admissions folks, right? Real students
Yes.
are asking real questions to the real humans on those campus tours. Find the ones that are most common. Those are good. But yes, ChatGPT can be a really good research companion. Turn on that deep research mode and it can go out and find so much information on your behalf. Yes.
Are you, so we're referencing ChatGPT a lot. It's become the like Kleenex of tissues for me. So I usually do reference ChatGPT, but obviously there's plenty of other generative AI tools out there. Are you doing this whole process just within ChatGPT, or are you also simulating it in other tools and kind of seeing the differences there?
I try to remind myself to use other platforms as well. ChatGPT does have the largest market share. So I like that as a researcher. It's what I have a paid subscription to. So I can get better results and more results from it. I am an Android user by and large. So I do have a lot of access to Gemini on my mobile phone. It's just kind of always there. So when I'm testing things on mobile, I tend to see things in Gemini. I do experiment with Perplexity. That's sometimes a tool I use with students as they're conducting research for projects and stuff. So I like that interface as well.
So, Adam, you gave 5 really practical recommendations in your session, which I love in any conference presentation because it allows people to like know what they need to go do right now. So, walk me through what those 5 recommendations are and, any level of prioritization within them, because it's easy to say, well, they're all important, but like if you had to go fix 1 or 2 things, like where would you spend your time?
So the 5 recommended strategies here were to answer questions directly, to eliminate friction from the user experience, to clean up outdated content, to prioritize accessibility, and to embrace the zero-click lifestyle, right? Just kind of experience it for yourself. To me, I think the biggest payoff would come from that first one, answering questions directly. If your content is not doing that, it is very unlikely it's going to be showing up as a mention or a citation in these chat sessions, right? Generative AI algorithms are doing a lot more than just listing all of the content that's out there that is somewhat relevant to the keywords. It's really looking for that hyper-specific context. So if the user has a question, it's going to do its best effort to answer that question. And that machine learning algorithm is taking cues from your content structure about where the answer for that might lie. So if your content structure is confusing, or if your headers are not anticipating the questions and the content immediately following those headers are not answering that question, then the machine learning algorithm is going to have a really hard time identify where on your page, even though it seemed relevant, it seemed high authority, it ranked well while it was casting its own searches, it doesn't know where the answer is. It's going to have to look elsewhere to fill in that knowledge gap for the response that it's generating for the user. So I think really paying attention to having this tight question answer alignment anytime you're producing content online helps the user. It helps the user anywhere, right? This is good content strategy, not just for generative AI content, but it's also really good user experience for when those users come to your website as well. And they don't want to be digging deep under a header or deep into several queries to try to find, or opening a PDF to find the answer to a question that could have been brought forward in a much more easy and identifiable way for them, right? Colleges are actually really well positioned to answer a lot of questions that prospects have. This is great news. We get citations and mentions as college institutions all the time when we're asking college-related questions in our generative search engine. So we are the authority on it. especially once we get to branded content. You are almost always going to see your flagship website cited in the response that the generative engine is coming up with, right? If they already have their brand awareness there. I think the opportunity lies in finding ways to anticipate and answer the questions in that broader unbranded moment, right? So what happens to the student that just wants to know, what do I even need to start thinking about as I start thinking about the college search process, right? So no college list yet generated. We can answer those questions too. We're actually really, really good at answering those questions. So making sure that we have content that aligns with those questions and concerns of internet users and prospects as they begin that early search moment.
And a really great place to, we mentioned like, hey, walk across campus and like actually talk to your admission counselors because they know a lot of those questions. But if you have a chat bot on your website, it's probably now a data playground of all the questions that people are asking. And when this is reminding me of a conversation I had with Hannah Wilson from Forsyth Tech Community College this summer. She noted that you can even take it a step farther and not just look at what the questions are, but the subtle differences between how those questions are phrased and asked at different days of the week and different times of the day. So a little fun tip for listeners. Adam, as we wrap this one up, there's a lot of chief marketing officers and communication officers who listen to this podcast. And I know oftentimes people will share this all the way up with their president. So let's bring it up to that leadership level. What's one thing that you'd want a president or a CMO to remember if they walked out of the room of your presentation last week in Grand Rapids?
I think the big takeaway message is that generative AI is not an emerging trend. It's the status quo now. And the best time to invest in it was probably 2 years ago to understanding this. The second best time is right now. Make sure you have the experts in place and the resources in place to understand this shift. And if I were to drill down into that a little bit more, I can even pick on my presentation title a little bit with it's not even upper funnel anymore. Maybe it was when I submitted my conference presentation, but just this morning I was like, you know what? I haven't tinkered with agents nearly enough since all the flurry of agent activity has happened. And so I was like, hey, ChatGPT, can you fill out the RFI on my college website for me? It did great. It filled it out. I did not get out. It was wild just to watch it go through that journey, right? And so now we are approaching a moment where ChatGPT or any generative search narrative kind of moment on the internet can be a full funnel experience for our users, right? And we actually had some really big announcements this past week from OpenAI with its app integrations, right? You can go from the moment of product discovery on a place like Etsy or Spotify, where were the two big partnerships that OpenAI announced, and you can research and compare your different product options right there in OpenAI. And you can complete your purchase without even leaving that conversational chat, right? And so I am ready and excited to explore, and a little bit and also terrified, of course. But I want to look for that moment where the full funnel experience for applying to a college, right, making that college decision, is a conversation that you are having with your friends, families, and loved ones. But it's also a conversation you're having there in an AI platform. And you can complete that full journey right there without leaving the chat session. The technology is already there. I think there's still a lot of discomfort and still a lot of questions about what we can do with that possibility. But yeah, we're moving very quickly into a world where the internet could look very, very different than the one that we've had for the past 2 decades. So.
Yes, it will look very different than the one we've all grown up with. Folks, if you are experiencing some FOMO as you've been listening to Adam talk about this, don't worry, because there is another really great industry conference coming up in just less than a month in National Harbor, Maryland. That is the 2025 AMA Symposium for the Marketing of Higher Education. And if you're listening to this episode the day that the podcast drops, October 13th, you're in luck. Today is the last day for early bird registration. I know from being part of the committee that planned the program this year that the agenda is maybe the best it's ever been. And I am so excited to go and continue to learn about topics like the one that we have been discussing today, among many, many other topics that are just critical for us to be having conversations that we need to be discussing in higher ed right now. So I hope you'll all get a chance to be there in just under a month. And Adam, it was so great to meet you just a couple weeks ago. And thank you for taking some time to hop on the podcast. Where's the best place for folks to connect with you if they've got some questions after they take a look at your slide deck?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I will happy to respond to any messages. I love nerding out about this topic.
Yes.
So reach out to me. I will talk to you about it. I will share my experimentations with you, and I would love to hear what other folks are doing in this space.
Amazing. He said he would share his experimentations with us. That in and of itself is a reason to reach out to Adam. Y'all, it's been great. We have so much fun and the time just flies. Thanks again, Adam. And folks, we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening to the Higher Ed Pulse. The show is a proud member of the Enrollify Network, home to Higher Ed's largest collection of podcasts. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow, so be sure to check out our other podcasts, webinars, video clips, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe for all the latest details and content drops directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the digital workforce platform for higher ed. Learn more at element451.com.